Okay, I'm here with Governor Bill Graves, President of American Trucking Associations. Thank you for joining us.
Sure, Neil.
I want to go back to the very start of your time here at ATA. You were named president technically not long after the 9/11 terrorist attacks. You finished out your term as governor before joining in the beginning of 2003. Especially for some of our younger viewers, could you share some of the memories of that time and about the transition from being governor to coming on board here at ATA?
Well, I remember, Neil, that I was very pleased, flattered when I was contacted about the possibility of coming to lead ATA, and yet the conflict, of course, was that I still had about a year and a half to go in my term of office, and it was a challenging time for the country, and I felt a really strong obligation to finish out my term, and yet ATA had a need for leadership almost immediately, and thankfully we were able to work out an understanding with Billy Canary that Billy stayed on and served in an interim president's capacity for that period of time, and then actually graciously was a big part of the smooth transition that we had in January of 2003. So it ended up working out as well as I could have asked for.
So let's fast forward to your first MC&E at ATA's annual conference in 2003. We're going to put a shot of it up on the screen. And Norman Mineta, who was Transportation Secretary, came to the conference at that time and spoke and shared that the Bush administration was opposed to raising the federal fuel tax, something that was discussed back then. We talk about the need back in 2003 and even before that, the need to cover future costs of maintaining and expanding highways. Here we are in all these years later, still wrestling with some of these same issues, inability to get the fuel tax raised. How frustrating is something like that over this long a period to sort of feel you have the right answer to get a big problem solved and just can't really get that through?
You know, Neil, frustration is one word that would describe it. I mean, as a former public official, somebody who, as you know, we've talked about, my efforts to raise my state's fuel tax not once but twice for our transportation program. You're almost sad that we've come to this point in our nation where the politics of an issue have overtaken the policy considerations on the issue. I simply don't believe anyone actually thinks there's a better way. I honestly don't think that there's a path forward that devolves the federal program to the states. I actually don't think it makes sense to raid the federal treasury's general fund to supplant what has traditionally been a user-funded program. But we're just in a toxic political time at this moment, and have been now for a number of years. It's been building almost to a crescendo as we're speaking now. We all know that the Congressional Budget Office has already scored the current bill. If it were to be replicated when the FAST Act now expires, now they're saying we need to find $100 billion plus of new revenue. And so even Congress will eventually run out of these sort of gimmicky one-off solutions. And a day of reckoning is coming. I guess to a certain extent I feel sad that I won't be part of helping be part of a solution when that day of reckoning comes.
Let's shift to some of the accomplishments of your time here with ATA. As you begin to look back at your years here, what are some that stand out?
I'd start with just kind of where we are as a federation. There was a time, and I think probably to the surprise of some folks, but actually the federation was not as unified. And while some would say, well, gee, if this is an example today of unification, then boy, I would hate to see it when we weren't. But there was a time when I don't think the relationship between ATA Washington was all that good with state associations. And of course, as we've seen, the strength of our advocacy and effect of who we are really lies with the grassroots of state association involvement. And so I think we've come a long way. in how we've repaired and now are utilizing the resources that are available to us from the state associations. I think we've weathered the storm on a number of key personnel transitions, especially over at the Capitol Hill office, and that's obviously sort of where the face of ATA really resides. As much as we might like to think otherwise, we are an advocacy organization, and our presence and what we do and how we conduct our business on Capitol Hill is how the members of Congress, see and know us. And, I think we've again weathered some storms, but ably represented this industry over these 14 years that I've been here. We've done a lot of restructuring here internally to ATA. That's not been easy. It's put a lot of people in some sort of uncomfortable spots relative to having to change the way this organization functions. I think we still have some work to do, and I'll probably be handing off some of that work to my successor. But, I think all in all, in an environment of quite a bit of regulatory overload and difficult political times over on Capitol Hill, we've conducted ourselves pretty well over these 14 years.
Besides the fuel tax highway funding, which we touched on, are there any other disappointments of things that didn't quite get done? Maybe it's Congress's fault or otherwise. And along with that, is there any day or days that stand out as maybe some of the toughest of your time here?
Well, clearly we're, at work at this moment, trying to get ourselves, to the final, across the finish line on our favorite subject, hours of service. I was terribly disappointed last fall when we ended up with some language missing in the appropriations bill that would have resolved that then, and here we are now months later still working on it. I'm disappointed that I haven't found a strategy or a path forward to more effectively combat the anti-truck groups that exist in this country. We have a great story to tell, and we preach to the choir here internally all the time about the efforts companies make to operate safely, about the essentiality of what we do to support the economy of this country, about the great men and women who are part of that effort each and every day. And yet there have been folks who have successfully created a narrative that makes trucking some sort of bad guy. And I suppose I feel like I should have found a way forward, a way to do more to dispel those the negatives in those narratives.
I'm going to ask you to project out a little bit. There's a lot of technology buzzwords out there in trucking right now, maybe more than ever before. There's Uberization of trucking, which we're still trying to figure out exactly what that is. There's on-demand delivery, platooning, and autonomous, and it seems every day more and more in the national media, trucking is coming in through some of these technology terms. When you look out, how do you see that this stuff may affect the future of trucking, and maybe it's in terms of some of the regulations in dealing with Congress?
Well, you can kind of compartmentalize. I mean, we're clearly excited about all of the safety technologies, and so many of our member companies are embracing certainly testing and trying to understand the ROI and the benefit of new safety technologies, and I think that'll be a wonderful thing, because that'll be part of what will eventually dispel this narrative I was referring to about our industry and our commitment to safety. I think that on the sort of operational side, both in terms of the sort of the dependability of the trucks and the trailers and all the equipment that we move, we're seeing a lot of technological advancements that let us know in advance, or at least know more quickly how to remedy and keep our trucks rolling. We're doing so much now with monitoring, driver, behavior and performance. That inures both benefit on the safety side. Also, I think eventually on the health and quality of life side for drivers. We have to care about the lifestyle that our drivers live, and how those technologies perhaps can help us improve the way we utilize them and the way we support them in the jobs that they do. So, I mean, you know, the logistics, all of the different technologies that make moving freight more efficient and dependable, those are all great things. The one place that I'm concerned, and it goes back to our brief conversation about highway funding, so many of the technologies now on whether it's autonomous, whether it's driverless, whether there's a driver but not paying quite as much attention, or you know, or
Still
whether
sorting that out.
we're still sorting all those things out. It just seems to me like that the way we ultimately take full advantage of those is to have the kind of infrastructure that will support them. We know already that some of our OEMs have already developed technologies where you can put a driver in the cab of the lead truck and have, you know, in effect, dummies follow it along. That's fabulous. That would be wonderful technology to help us overcome some of our driver shortage problems, capacity problems, I mean, safety problems. And yet the only way you deploy it is if you've got a probably truck-only lane. And you know, at this moment, I just can't tell you where the money comes from to build truck-only lanes to take advantage of that kind of technology. So I think that's one shortcoming or drawback that we're going to have to figure out how to overcome.
And this may be something the person who is the next president of ATA may have to deal with, so I'll wrap with this. What advice or maybe any warnings you may give the person that ultimately is chosen to select you, to replace you?
Well, it's like the economy as a whole. It's an ever-changing industry. You know, growing up as a kid, you know, in a very traditional LTL regional regulated carrier, you know, the world looks completely different today. The significance of truckload to our economy right now is something you couldn't have envisioned back in the 1970s, and you know, here we are 45 years later, and you know, they're moving the preponderance of freight in this country. I think the you know, again, the level of congestion, so whoever follows me is going to have to pick up the mantle and keep running with the, you know, the concerns we have about investment and infrastructure. But you know, 3PLs and all these different sorts of operational configurations that each of our members is engaged in means they have a different view of what policies or what concerns are important to them. So it's harder to sort of, you know, be the one-size-fits-all that ATA has traditionally always been. And yet, you know, every time we end up getting into some sort of squabble that's kind of got a one-off element to it, we ultimately end up appreciating that if we can't circle back around and speak with one voice, be united as an industry over on Capitol Hill, our chances of our legislative policy, legal success start to diminish very quickly. So the challenge to the next person is to come in the midst of a very changing you know, industry and, you know, jump right on and you know, carry forward.
All right. Okay, Governor, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Neil.